What are you for? What are you for? 13 seconds. Turn and talk to a neighbor. What are you for? What are you for?
It's cleanup runs.
My mother taught for 30 years. She went on to teach teachers for 10. She often says, Marlon, when sharing a new idea, first state your intentions, then communicate the experiences that inform those intentions. And because I love my mama, this is ritual. I say yes, ma'am. My intentions are first to antagonize the hell out of unhappy endings. Hell is mediocrity, hell is doubt, hell is fear, hell is middle-of-the-road thinking. I want to antagonize the hell out of the way we look at unhappy endings. Secondly, I want to incite a riot of the heart that grows fertile in tension. I want us to find beauty in tension, bounty in tension, harvest in tension. Lastly, to be sensitive to your experiences but not passive to your growth. In the ECOTONE. My favorite architect of all time, Zaha Hadid. Anybody know Zaha Hadid's work? Booyaka. She passed last year. Or was it the year before last? Silent mentor of mine. She developed these ornate structures that look like the future in the midst of traditional buildings. And when asked why she did that as an architect, she said, I am sensitive to my context, but not passive in it. Man, I am sensitive to your leadership and to the work that you guys are doing with young people and subsequently with the future of our world. I'm very sensitive to that, and I respect you as leaders. And in no way am I trying to demean you. And I'm trying to provoke something new out of you. Is that okay? That's what's up. How do I find forward in the messy, muddy middle? Anybody know about the messy, muddy middle? Finding forward in the ECOTONE. I mentioned the ECOTONE earlier. The ECOTONE is my favorite new subject. And what is an ECOTONE? Great question. Y'all ask good questions. The ECOTONE is a transition area of change between two biomes, meaning two biosystems become the bread for the meat that is the ECOTONE. So the ECOTONE is sort of like the in between the grassy knoll. Anybody ever went swimming in a pond before? I can't see you very well, so just raise real high, yeah? So you run down the grassy knoll, you're like, ooh, yeah. And then you get into the ECOTONE and you go, ew. And then you jump in the pond, yay! The ECOTONE gets in your toes, it gets in your toenails. The ECOTONE reminds you that you were in a pond the next day, depending on how you showered or bathed. The ECOTONE is messy, it's muddy, and there are three things about the ECOTONE that very few people know. Number one, the ECOTONE is biodiverse. The organisms that live in the ECOTONE, in the messy middle, can live either in the grass, in the water, or in the ECOTONE. They are diverse in how they live their lives. Number two, did y'all know that the soil in the ECOTONE is fertile than the mug? Dinamug. That's urban English vernacular. Phoenix, you don't know that either. You're too young. That's urban English. You live in suburbs. That's urban English vernacular for a lot. It's very, very fertile in the ECOTONE. You could drop a seed and just about grow anything in the ECOTONE, though it'd be messy. And lastly, it's the integration of two communities. Integration of two communities. Eco, life. Tonos, tension. Let's say this together. Ready? Say it. Innovation, a word that many of us love to use. Innovation or finding forward. Did you know that finding forward can be another way or expression of what it means to innovate? Innovation or finding forward grows in the tension between where we are from and where we are going. Is that biblical? In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was formless, empty, dark, and God was hovering over the ecotone of his creation. Did you not know that as the earth began from God's intention to see human beings and the earth flourish, that in the messy middle, it was dark? In the messy middle, it was what Eugene Peterson calls a blob of nothingness. Have you ever felt like that in your ministry? Have you ever felt like you wish you had never said yes to the call? Have you ever felt like it was really a no when you said it was a yes? No? Yes. When we are in the midst of transformation and change, when we are transitioning from one place to the next, as we find forward in between where we've come from, we talked about that a couple hours ago, and where we're going is this messy, muddy middle space that there is something to do with. There is something for us to do in the messy, muddy middle. There's someone for us to become. There's somewhere for us to go, and it is fertile, my friends. And it makes you more diverse as a human being and as a leader than you ever will be. Fifi, did you see this? Watch this. Watch Daddy. ECOTONE. Don't get down. Don't take it down. You're a hater. You know that was live. Maybe it wasn't. We feel like we're stuck in the ecotone with no possibility, with no innovation, with no way to find forward. But may I remind you, through 3 stanzas from the ecotone, that there is somewhere to be, someone to become in between where we've come and where we are moving forward. Here's the first stanza, the first lesson. Focus on what you are for and away from what you are against in the ecotone. Some people really like talking about what they're against. Don't you know that only when we focus on what we're for will we move forward? And when we focus on what we are against, we move againstward. And where in the world is againstward? Where will againstward take you? Huh? Nowhere. Againstward will have you in the ecotone complaining about the mud in between your toes and not seeing the diverse opportunity that you have to unearth God's compassion even in the midst of the clutter. Focus on what you are for, my dear leaders. Don't focus on the youth that you are against, because I know some of y'all got grudges against the youth. I was a youth pastor too. You cuss some of them kids out when they not listening. I know you do. Or was it just me? Maybe that's why the Lord pushed me out of that ministry. Don't judge me, Phoenix. Stanza number 2. Never despise chaotic beginnings. Some of us wait to begin something before the chaos clears, and you never start. God did not wait for a clear beginning before he moved in choreography with the transformation that was happening in the blob of nothingness. Man, God was with it. God was with it so true that God was like an infinite and magnificent jazz musician. Did you guys know that jazz music is called jazz because at one point it was called junk? It did not have I know it is hilarious. It did not have, because jazz is ill. Jazz is the only American art form that America offers to the world, jazz and hip hop. And also Southern cuisine, which is really black food. If slavery had been in the North, it'd be Northern cuisine. But this food, because of the people this music, because of the people that offered it, Dark, Genesis, because some of the improvisation that was used to approach some of the chord progressions seemed to be formless and did not have the traditional chamber music movement. It was formless. And because it seemed like it was empty, it really wasn't coming from nowhere, it wasn't going nowhere. In the United States, like jazz, music experts call jazz music junk. However, when jazz music made its way to Europe, the people in Europe said, this isn't junk, this is jazz. Maybe God wants to turn your junk into jazz if you're willing for God to play with you, to improvise with you. If you're willing to be God's saxophone, John Coltrane, saxophone. What if God wants to use you in a way that moves in harmony and rhythm with the Miles Davis blues that only God can turn into different hues that transform the yous and the me's and the us's and the we's? What if God wants to use your junk in the messy, muddy middle to make it jazz? Never despise the chaotic beginning. Welcome it. Smell it. Even if some of the chaos is your direct result, it's the result of you. Because God can use the crap of your present to fertilize your future. If you process it right. Because if you don't process it right, it's just going to stink. Lesson number 3, unhappy endings can lead to pure beginnings. Lift and spread your toes. Put your feet on the ground. Feel the knuckles of your feet grounded into your shoe and through your shoe into the carpet and through the carpet to the concrete and through the concrete that's connected to the structure of this building that's connected to the earth, that's connected to the earth's core. You are here, you are present, your backs are straight. Inhale in through your nose. Sigh it out through your mouth. Some of us are waiting for happy endings to move on. And you think that until life presents itself with a beautiful red or pink bow to wrap things up before you move on to the next ministry, to wrap things up before you move on to the next season. You think that life will do that, but maybe God wants to use your unhappy ending to create a pure beginning. There's an urban poet, his name is J. Cole, and he says, in my neighborhood, we don't do happy endings. We do pure beginnings. And in my neighborhood, which is in 3rd Ward, Texas, Houston, we have a community space called Project Row Houses. And Project Row Houses is dedicated to providing opportunities for artists to speak for the community and to the community through art. And I was recently given an opportunity. Thank you so much, Nikki. I was recently given an opportunity. Nikki, y'all give it up for Nikki for keeping your boy on time. Nikki, knew a girl named Nikki. Oh, that's wrong. Nikki, I'm sorry. I wasted my 5 minutes on that mess. Some friends of mine and I took an old house, an old row house, about 250 square foot house, and turned it into a live exhibition space, an art space, where we can talk about the unhappy ending that's happening in our neighborhood because our neighborhood is being gentrified, and people are buying homes that have been in families for years for nothing and building condos that are worth nothing and pushing an entire community out. So we decided to take one of the homes. That's Harrison to the far right. He's a choreographer. That's Anthony. He's a sculptor. That's Danielle. She's a writer. And then that's me. God knows what I am. And we took this house and turned it into a space where you can go in and you can experience the stories of 2 women who have experienced loss. They're in the messy, muddy middle. One is a community center leader, and the other is a woman who was a resident of Third Ward, but she lost her home. And one day, about a year ago, I was editing a film, a documentary, and I fell asleep. And I woke up in my dream. I had a dream that I woke up and that I was standing in between my computer, and my computer had 3 spaces. There was the first space that was the person talking, like with the bus shot, and then there was the third space, the last space, and that was the person like dancing and like moving. And then in the middle, I was able to get up out of my seat and walk into the middle in between the conscious storytelling and the subconscious movement. And I was standing in between looking at both of them, watching how story really happens. You know, the story really is in between the subconscious and the conscious. That's what the real story is. And so I had a dream of creating an art house that would represent that space, and we did it. Before you leave the city of Houston, if you have time, if you're leaving on Monday or Tuesday, please go to Project Row Houses. It represents beauty in our community in the midst of brokenness. And so I did exactly that. I created a space where people can experience the ecotone of a story. And there was this one woman who told her story, and you could turn the sound down on this. Her name is Miss Deborah. And Miss Deborah lost her home, and it was a home that she had lived in most of her life, where she raised her son, a home where she was raised in too. And she experienced great loss and great pain and great sorrow. And when she came in for us to film her story, as she began to speak her story, she just wept and was melting and was falling apart. And I was so broken as a storyteller, even capturing the film. And so afterwards, I said, Miss Deborah, how do you find courage to continue to move forward despite the fact that your neighbor, I'm sorry, I've been showing y'all love. Y'all been looking at my booty the whole time. Despite the fact that you are experiencing so much loss. And she said, baby, she said, they can tear up my neighborhood, but they can't uproot my heart. She said, there's something growing in this neighborhood that no one can extinguish. My dear friends, you are in the ecotone. You're not at the end. And even if you are at an end, it's a pure beginning. And even in the midst of that pure beginning, if it's not happening as you want it to happen and it feels like junk, maybe, just maybe, God wants to turn the junk of your present into the jazz of your future. Da-da-da-da-da, da-da, ba-da-da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da-da, da-da. Da, da. Let's go, Fee. Da, 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 da. Come on, sweet stuff. Da, 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 da. Come on, Phoenix. Da, 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 da. Da, 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 da. Da, 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 da.